For years, it's been heavily debated amongst both fans and critics of The Legend of Korra whether or not it stands up to its predecessor, Avatar: The Last Airbender, and when it comes to it, its flaws, what the source of them were to begin with. I want to provide ideas for how the series can be improved without changing everything. While I'm going to focus on the problems, I'm also going to say how they can be fixed. I'll be only covering book 1 and 2, as I feel the problems are the biggest in these 2 seasons. What I want to criticize season 1 on before anything is not related to the writing or even the animation. It's the fact that there are no epilepsy warnings in season 1 due to the amount of flashing lights that I'm surprised no one's gotten angry at. That's a lawsuit just waiting to happen, guys.
Originally, I was going to set up this critique more like how Cyberspark sets them up, such as going into the editing, the voice acting, the characters, etc. But then I realized a running trend.
Looking over all my notes, I noticed that the problem isn't the characters themselves or even the overall plot, except for book 2, but we'll get into that. It's the characters' introductions, the build-up, and the relationships, and not just the ones that you're thinking of, except for Bolin, but bear with me. To understand this, we need to look at the worst episode.
No, go past this part. In fact, never play this again.
I'm gonna say it now. You clicked on my video to hear my opinion. I'm not gonna say don't like, don't watch, but I'm hoping you came in with an open mind, even if you disagree with me. And if you get angry, well, you've only got yourself to blame. Now, to get the first elephant out of the room, I have to address another elephant in the room, and that's the ship wars from Voltron. I heard the ship wars started over the age differences with the characters that a lot of fans ended up pairing. What made both shipping environments so terrible in Voltron and The Legend of Korra were ambiguities. While you can have ambiguities in other parts of stories, you should never have anything ambiguous about relationships. Communication is everything in relationships and everything in storytelling. A miscommunicated love story, that's a bad combination. Korra got all the hate in this episode, but this episode made everyone look horrible. Korra and Pema saw no issue with overstepping other people's boundaries. Korra got all the hate for agreeing with this idea, but she was a dumb teenager who obviously never dated before. Why didn't all the hate go to Pema for that? She's a married woman with 3 kids, expecting a 4th at the time. What was she thinking? Mako, being the most mature of the group, wasn't stern enough with Korra. He should have made it clear with her to take his relationship with Asami seriously or be kicked off the team. That should have been the end of that. And as for the awful kiss scene, I've heard people have been accusing Korra of assaulting Mako, but if Mako really didn't want Korra kissing him, he had the option to push her away. Bolin gets treated like the biggest victim in this episode, but he's actually kinda creepy in this, and several other episodes. Bolin has a nice guy attitude, and watching this again, Bolin praising Korra makes me rather uncomfortable, as it reminds me of something known as love bombing. It's one thing to give someone props, it's another thing to glorify them. Many of the villains in The Legend of Korra had idolized people when they first met them. One of the heroes should not be doing the same thing.
Now with that mess out of the way, let's get into how to fix The Legend of Korra. Korra is a full-time pro-bender, a princess, and the Avatar. This makes her a borderline Mary Sue. The only thing that separates her from being a full Mary Sue is that she has to learn her powers, and she is tortured in book 3, but for actual character growth, not just so you'll feel sorry for her. What really didn't help is the scene with Korra using the Avatar state to cheat in a children's game. This made her irredeemable in many people's eyes. In Book 1 and 2, Korra isn't shown trying to connect with her past lives enough or use her other skills. In Book 2, Korra takes herself way too seriously and continues to be a jerk to Mako when he's just trying to help her. Korra does apologize later, but there's no reason given why she's so hostile in Book 2. I don't think it's Korra's personality that is the issue here, it's the way that she has been set up with all this. Here's how I think you can make Korra more likable. First, change Korra's roles and relationships. That goes for both romantic and platonic. Make Korra only be a stand-in for the waterbending role on the pro-bending team. This will not only reduce the big roles she has, but also reduce the amount of pro-bending taking place during the plot, as many people have argued it took up way too much time. Next, make Korra a more distant relative to Unalaq, or don't make them blood related at all. This gets rid of her princess role. Now here is what I believe that will be the biggest improvement to this series if you revise it. In Book 3, it was explained Korra was kidnapped as a baby by the Red Lotus, that being why her parents kept her stuck at the South Pole. Why did Korra have to be a baby when the Red Lotus tried to kidnap her? This opens up several questions. How did the Red Lotus know that Korra was the Avatar, or even before the White Lotus could figure it out? Change Korra's age when she was kidnapped by the Red Lotus, making her about, say, 4 or 5 years old, so this way she has actual memories of it. Now, not only could you open this series with Korra being rescued by her parents and Sokka, this would explain her behavior in the first 2 seasons. On top of that, it would create more tension and more opportunities for character development, and overall give better framing to the series. Now, if you were to make this change, this part is optional, but I think it would just be a natural lead-in. Along with Korra being the only Avatar that doesn't travel the world to be trained, she could have agreed with her parents to keep that she's the Avatar a secret, like superheroes commonly do.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Let me explain. Korra doesn't have to keep her identity a secret for the whole series, just book 1. And Korra hiding her identity would actually go along with the other alter egos in the original series. Tenzin and Korra's parents would warn her that telling the world who she is would put her in danger again. But Korra, being a growing social animal known as a human, would begin to protest this. The obstacle for Korra telling the world she is the Avatar would be her fear of losing her bending, as Amon knowing who she is would put her at higher risk. This superhero dynamic would also explain why she's so obsessed with being the Avatar. The plotline setup of a growing woman overcoming her childhood trauma is far more compelling than the setup of a seemingly spoiled brat that needs to get her act together.
Hi, it's Koi Monster's friend Techno. My voice box broke, and I have to use Windows 98. Koi Monster got too frustrated when redoing Asami's part, so I took over for her. Koi Monster never hated Asami, but she is the most inconsistent character out of the main cast, and she had a very poor introduction. Asami is supposed to be a great driver, but when Mako and the audience meet her, it was her randomly crashing into him on her moped. Then Asami being overly nice to Mako afterward made some viewers suspicious of her. We learn more about Asami in the episode The Aftermath, when Korra and Asami have fun test driving and saying she can look after herself, but she didn't protest being treated as weak in that same episode, when she is faced with the possibility her father is working with the Equalists. This passive behavior only continues in book 2. While the base of Asami's design isn't bad, her darker color scheme and heavy makeup makes her look like Lust from Full Metal Alchemist. Both Asami's design and role starting out as a romantic rival to Korra gave many audience members the impression she is of Elaine. In book 2 it is nice to see Mako and Asami working together. Too bad it ends up going nowhere, and we couldn't see them work together when they were an actual couple. Koi Monster was going to give Asami credit for not treating Bolin like an idiot when he was in an abusive relationship in book 2, but in the next scene she is shown to be okay with bribery.
You what?
This isn't just related to Asami, but Koi Monster's biggest problem with book 1 has been that all of Korra's friends just so happen to agree with her on the political climate in her world. There needs to be more differences in viewpoints in the new Team Avatar. The biggest fix to Asami is changing her introduction. Koi Monster suggests Korra and Asami should start out as pen pals instead. Asami is the daughter of Hiroshi Sato, who is well known. Korra could have contacted Asami as her father works in an industry she likes, and they would then write back and forth for years. This would give Korra even more motivation to go to Republic City to see a friend she never actually met. Have Korra meet Asami first thing when she gets to Republic City and tell Asami she is the Avatar. This would be a big deal for both of them. Have Asami supports the Equalists at the beginning of book 1, but has good intentions. Asami could have looked for help from the Equalists, given her own mother was killed by a firebender. Asami could have argued Amon was only taking away the bending from criminals, until she saw that Amon wants to take everyone's bending. Asami also dated Mako, who is a firebender in spite of one killing her mother. Why is she this open-minded, yet her father isn't? Mako wanting to be a cop could make Asami uncomfortable, given where she lives, and being a non-bender she could have a bad history with them. The lack of a shared common goal and trust would then cause Asami to break up with Mako, instead of the love triangle. Bolin could have argued that the bribery is okay in this situation, because he's doing it to save Korra's father. Asami could then give Bolin a hard time for this, telling him you just don't abandon your principles, because something inconvenient comes up. If you're going to make Asami passive, make it part of her growth. Make it that she knows what she wants, but needs to assert herself more. Asami could be very upset at the trial. This could remind her of having to testify against her own father for trying to murder her. Asami would then get so upset she had to leave. This would show her as someone who can hold her own weight, but still has a sensitive side.
Thanks Techno for your help. Now it's time for me to rip Bolin a new one. Bolin was meant to be comic relief, but many of his scenes hide several disturbing implications about his personality and intentions, like I brought up in the worst episode. In Season 2, the actress Ginger had turned Bolin's advances down several times, which he only continued to double down on.
Britt needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. They're the same picture.
When Bolin isn't being creepy, he's useless, and he only develops critical thinking skills once it's convenient for the plot. And he gets rewarded for all his god-awful behavior.
That's disturbing.
Why is Mako not way more pissed at Bolin for his awful treatment? Bolin has been a complete ass to him, telling him to his face the only reason he believes Varric is behind the city attacks is because he's insane. To top this all off, Bolin caused the Civil War to become a subplot in Book 2 with his taking over. Say what you will about all the other characters, but even in their worst appearances, they didn't do this. Now, to fix this mess of a character, if you're going to make Bolin a toxic jackass, make it part of his character growth. Make Mako be more of the star in Book 1, and Bolin gets looked over by the pro-bending fans. Bolin has been shown to be the envious type before, in a scene where he thinks Tarlok is a boy Korra's age pursuing her, so this makes him consistent. Leave Bolin's base personality alone, but when he overcompliments people, they get uncomfortable. When Bolin starts to do better in the movers, show fame goes to his head and have him punished for his awful behavior. Make it clear that Bolin feels he's been living in Mako's shadow, and make Bolin actually helpful in Season 2. In Southern Lights, where he did nothing, have Bolin use a walkie-talkie he found in the coat that Varric lent him, so he can call for backup when they get stranded. Take all the scenes from the movers and make them all one episode, and move it into the middle of the season. Bolin starts to get too comfortable with his new lifestyle and starts spending too much money on luxuries. Bolin's growing ego blinds him and he starts treating everyone like a servant, with Eska only enabling this. This time when Mako is in prison and Bolin visits him, make Mako visibly angry at his brother. Have Bolin find out too late that Mako was right when Varric attacks. Bolin returns to Mako telling him what happened, only for Mako to punch him in the face, and rightfully scold him, telling him it only got this bad in the first place because he wouldn't listen. When walking out of prison, Mako is met with claps, but Bolin is met with a lawyer telling him Ginger is filing a lawsuit against him for harassment and assault.
You're a creep! Go away!
Bolin returns to his apartment to see the bank took all his belongings for his irresponsible spendings. And who is there waiting for him? Eska, his abusive girlfriend. Bolin can work to redeem himself in the season final after breaking up with Eska. While I do like how Mako is set up as a mature and stern father figure type character, his design is the weakest and doesn't reflect his personality. Mako had also seen the least amount of development and growth out of the whole main cast. I've shown my beef with Mako's inconsistencies in Spirit of the Competition, but he has more in Book 2. The writers keep giving mixed messages if Mako and Asami are back together, and worst of all, Mako tries to burn his brother alive for being rude to him. And how other characters treat Mako doesn't help either. Lin treats Mako like a complete idiot just so someone doesn't hold his hand in Varric's pointless arc. And why does Mako trust the Triads and Peacekeepers? Just like with Asami, change how Mako is introduced. Mako becomes a cop in Book 2. Why not show him training more in Book 1 for this? He can train as a cop while working as a pro-bender on the side. Given Korra hides her identity in this timeline, Korra can be out fighting crime and bump into Mako. Korra recognizes Mako, who agrees to an autograph at the arena after the game. When Korra meets Mako again at pro-bending outside of her disguise, his anger now has a different context. He believes the Avatar stood him up, as Tenzin still kept her home overnight. While I had my beef with Mako being indecisive in his romantic relationships, if you're going to do this, make this aspect of his personality consistent. Mako would have gained his stern fatherly personality from having to look after his brother when living out on the streets, but resulting in him sacrificing his own wants and needs. Mako can have the opposite problem Asami does. While Asami is a woman who knows what she wants but has trouble asserting herself, Mako is a man who knows how to assert himself but doesn't know what he wants. And this could be another factor into why Asami breaks up with him. Along with Mako training to be a police officer, Asami gets fed up with Mako for being unable to make his own decisions. As a last effort to keep the relationship with her, he says he'll drop the training entirely, but this only frustrates Asami more. What did I just say, Mako? I'm not your mother, you need to make your own decisions. Next, give Mako more inner conflict. Given Mako's parents were murdered by a firebender and right in front of him, does he feel responsible for their death just because he shares a trait with their murderer? Making him a self-loathing firebender would show more of the social issues and would be a good parallel to Amon. Does Mako even consider that his powers aren't worth keeping because so many people distrust him, and even considers handing himself over to Amon? Mako did say himself in the episode The Revelation, "I knew a lot of people hated benders, but I've never seen so many in one place." You want to expand on how you know this, Mako? Have you experienced this firsthand? In Book 2, instead of Lin being hostile to Mako, Lin respects Mako for helping him take down Amon. But she's busy on her end and tells him she can't bail him out if he makes a mistake. This is a rather risky move, but if you keep it, it could have a big payoff. Given Mako is now a character set up as a guy who is unsure of himself, I'm actually going to advise you keep the love triangle.
Love triangles really only work if the outcome is not obvious and if all the characters involved are actually interesting, like if they actually have chemistry between each other. The only example of a love triangle done well that I can think of is from an anime called Fruits Basket, where you've got the main character, Toru, who kind of crushes on two guys from her class named Kyo and Yuki. The thing that works about the love triangle is both the guys are interesting in their own right, and there's real chemistry between the differing couples. And I'll decide I want to go with one pairing, and then I'll see like another episode, and then the other pairing seems more appealing. It's really conflicting.
Mako being a celebrity, he would have more dating options. Korra having the superhero dynamic would actually help with her chemistry. Korra tells Mako first thing out of her disguise she is the Avatar. This means she trusts him, and this means a lot more to Mako than Korra first realized. Given Mako grew up on the streets and had to work with gangs to get by, this would be the first time anyone outside of his family trusts him. It doesn't matter how many shared interests or goals you have, if you don't trust your friend or partner, you have nothing. For Korra, Mako is the first person who doesn't scold her for having a different view on what risks are worth it or not. That's a lot more compelling than playing a sport with someone and instantly having feelings for them. What made the main cast in Avatar compelling was not just that they came from different places or had different skills, but they all had different viewpoints. Some that changed and some that stayed the same. Shafferla Productions, who I'm referencing again, said the reason why Infinity War's conflict worked so well because all the cast members couldn't agree on what sacrifices were worth it or not. That's what my suggestion for the main cast ultimately leads up to. Asami would argue that fighting the Equalists is a bad idea and that they should work together, but the rest of the cast doesn't trust them at all. Korra would constantly be told to hide who she is to protect herself, only for this speech to lose all meaning from hearing it so much. This is the drama I wanted to see in The Legend of Korra, not the petty high school squabbles that you gave us.
It's my proposal, say whatever you like, but if you get it wrong, be prepared for a sword fight. Bring back the motherfucking duel, cause I got fools that I'd like to school in the battle of blades. Don't besmirch my name, I'll get slapped, and bleed fat, and that's that. Think twice for offending your claim, cause you might just die at the dawn of the next day. A flip-flop pistol is a mother-loving tool. Bring back the motherflipping duel.
Hi everyone, welcome back to How to Fix the Legend of Korra Part 3. I'm going to be honest, this is the part I've been most excited for. The villains. Many people have argued that the villains in Avatar are the strongest part of it. Unfortunately, the villains in Korra, just like the whole series, got mixed reactions. Honestly, the only villain I hated was Unalaq, but I do understand other people's grievances with the rest of them. Let's not waste any more time.
Let's get into it.
When it came to the plot twist with Amon actually being a waterbender, I completely understand both sides of the argument. On one hand, his real backstory does explain why he hates benders so much despite being one, as his powers were exploited by his own father, and he's a villain, of course he's gonna lie.
You really think someone would do that? Just tell lies?
On the other hand, the fake backstory overcomplicates and confuses his motive. And as the creator, it is your job to communicate with the audience. Setting up a character like this only to have it change on them, even if it was foreshadowed, will only make the viewers feel cheated. Outside of this debate, Amon's character has been shown to be inconsistent, as he brought backup with him when Korra challenged him to a fight, when he's meant to be all about fairness. I get she's the Avatar, but she's still a teenager, Amon. I think I might have a good compromise for Amon's backstory and powers. First, get rid of Amon's fake backstory. It was an unnecessary red herring. Don't make Amon a waterbender, but Amon can still have his telekinetic powers. Maybe also give him telepathic abilities alongside it. Make Amon exist in a weird gray area of being a bender. This could be linked to an old gene from energy bending that people used to practice. This would explain why Yukon and Tarlok could bloodbend without the full moon. Amon doesn't inherit waterbending, but from the old gene, it granted him telekinesis and telepathy. This would have explained his motive better. Benders don't recognize him as one of them because he can't control an element, and non-benders distrust him for his powers. From this experience, Amon would sympathize with non-benders and would want to help them, though be it in a twisted sense. But the past distrust would be why he hides who he is. This way you could keep Amon and Tarlok brothers, as I felt this dynamic was the strongest part of Book 1 in my opinion. Having telekinesis and telepathic powers would put a strain on Amon's mind and could cause permanent mental and physical damages. Amon could have lost one leg when his father pushed him too hard. Amon would have to work harder to walk, causing him to limp when he isn't fighting. Let's redo the scene with Amon and Korra early in Season 1. Have Amon show up alone and have him end up using his telepathic powers, trying to prevent himself from being crushed by Korra's boulder, where he has to fight the strain, collapses but comes out on top.
Call an ambulance! But not for me!
This would add more depth to Amon and would make the fight scenes more tense. Sticking to the gray area of his powers, Amon might not be able to waterbend, but his powers could still be linked to the moon cycles. So now the moon cycles now play a part again in Season 1. There are rare events in the moon cycle outside of an eclipse. Have it so Amon has control over Republic City longer. Korra and Mako find out Amon's secret and realize he plans to use one of the rare moon cycles in his final blow. This would add needed tension to the season final and remind the audience of the bigger world outside of Avatar. Given Amon was meant to be a sympathetic villain, adding to his motive, Amon would have a very human desire to be accepted into a group, which is something he never had. Amon doesn't have to lie to his supporters, but he doesn't have to be 100% honest with them either. This would show his supporters are so desperate for help, they don't even pause to think, who even is this guy?
The compromise with Amon's powers is a better fit for the themes of social issues set up in Book 1, as it would show that these issues are far more complicated than many people may realize, as there's many individuals out there who often fit into a middle ground of race, etc. I know a lot of people don't like Tarlok, but not only was he one of the better developed characters, he was actually one of the most consistent characters. The only problem with Tarlok, however, is a very big one. That is that his relationship with Korra doesn't provide the needed impact. He stabs Korra in the back, redeems himself, only for him to kill his brother and himself.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
The death scene was well executed by itself for the most part, but it means nothing if he doesn't have a strong connection with the protagonist. Imagine if Zuko was just randomly killed off in the middle of Season 1 of Avatar. We learn his tragic backstory of how he got his scar, only to turn to his uncle and say, well, life sucks, see ya. I don't think Avatar The Last Airbender would have reached its legendary status had you just randomly killed off a character like that. This is how I felt watching the scene again for my review.
And they were roommates.
Oh my god, they were roommates.
My solution to this could actually fix another problem I've been hearing about a lot. I've heard people argue that Korra should have had the hardest time learning waterbending due to her personality. In this timeline, I would make it that Korra has the ability to waterbend, but it's still very weak at first due to her childhood trauma. Katara could have taught her to be a healer, but given Korra is more competitive and Katara is too old to fight, who could be more qualified than Tarlok to be her new mentor? Tarlok being Korra's new waterbending mentor would now provide the needed impact for him both stabbing her in the back and then the murder-suicide. And this would give even more character development scenes for both Korra and Tarlok. Have scenes where Tarlok is being polite and calm around Korra, only for him to have sudden angry outbursts. This would be a better build-up to his sudden heel turn. Maybe adding an episode with Tarlok's mother might also be a good idea, considering he had a healthy relationship with her. Tarlok's mother could pass away, which could have factored into his huge blow-up. This would of course not excuse his actions, but it would add needed depth to him before killing him off. Tarlok told his backstory very well, but spilling out the whole thing all at once to Korra and Mako seems a bit much. Given the Avatar has been shown to share dreams with people in the past, have Korra share dreams with Tarlok, where his backstory is shown, then can be given more context in Book 1's final by Tarlok himself. Keep the death scene with Amon and Tarlok the same.
I've heard people complain Tarlok taking down Amon was anticlimactic as Korra didn't kill Amon herself, but this time it could be more of a cliffhanger. Make both Tarlok and Amon's actions and deaths actually play a role in Book 2's plot. Instead of the horrible opening of Book 2, we'll get into that in the Spirit video. Now Korra would have a good reason to care about Tarlok's death, given he was her second waterbending mentor. Have Korra frustrated for an actual reason this season, that being Amon getting away, and believing Amon is still holding Tarlok hostage. I would highly recommend you shorten the gap between Book 1 and 2. 6 months was way too long. Korra would help lead the search, with only for the searches all to lead to dead ends. Korra would now have motive to connect with the spirits to find out what happened, only to learn about the tragedy. This way you can have more natural conflict. The Southern Water Tribe supporters could use Amon and Tarlok's actions from Book 1 to paint all Northern Water Tribers in a bad light, showing that their actions had actual consequences. Just like with Korra's superhero arc, Korra coming to terms with Tarlok's death can be resolved at the end of the season. I'm not demanding you build a monument for Tarlok, I'm just asking for you to make his death and Amon's to actually mean something.
Death scenes do not make you cooler than any other writer, it's just another plot point.
Let's try it!
Oh, you're gonna stop me?
Yeah.
What you gonna do? Set your 10 existing fanboys on me?
Hey, there are actually like 12 of us, you know.
Varric right off the bat has a fun personality, and his role is clear through his design. The voice actor sounds like he's having a really great time voicing him, but what harms Varric's overall impact is not only his obvious villainy pathetically masqueraded as a plot twist.
I'm going to jail!
His plot really ends up going nowhere in the end as well, although it is continued into Book 3. Not to mention he has several plot holes in his arc. He apparently filmed the invasion of the South Pole and planted fake evidence in Mako's apartment to frame him for the things that he's exposing. How? Peacekeepers, which Varric played a big role in, is probably the worst episode tied with Spirit of the Competition. Unlike Spirit of the Competition, I don't think that this episode alone is what frustrated me so much though. In Season 2, I keep feeling like my intelligence as a viewer is constantly being insulted. Given the season started out on a huge plot hole, the obvious villains being set up as twist ones, and yet you expect me and all the other audience members to keep up with 3 plot points within 1 episode. I think a lot of the problems with Varric can easily be fixed by making a few small changes. Varric, since his plot point with kidnapping the president really didn't add up to much, here's 2 ways that you could possibly change him. Either cut down his scope of a villain, making him more of a petty criminal, such as making him a scam artist, could work better. However, that would end up getting rid of a lot of the suggestions I made for Bolin that I think would have actually made him much more compelling. Instead of his goal simply being to kidnap the president, have it be that he is caught funding both sides of the war and then gets chased out of town for it. I mean, you already borrowed a lot of things from Star Wars in the past. If you're gonna borrow from it still, you might as well borrow from the good parts of it. Varric being the only person now to be a jerk to Bolin when he's being abused by Eska is perfectly fine. This is a red flag that he is unsympathetic and untrustworthy. I think you can also add a bit to Varric. Maybe Varric is somebody who has had a hard time climbing up in the past to get what he wants, despite him being very talented. Make it that he decided to take shortcuts in life, only for them to blow up in his face. Right off the bat, Unalaq is extremely poorly written. Unalaq's role is made clear through his design, but that's sadly where all my compliments for him end. Unalaq immediately acts like a petty fundamentalist Christian who blames violent video games and fantasy books for school shootings and speaks to the people of the South like they're overgrown children.
You're all going to hell. Goodbye.
Just like with Varric, the writers pathetically tried to masquerade him as a twist villain. Unalaq has to be the biggest hypocrite in the whole series. How exactly does setting up your brother to destroy the spirit's home help them exactly? The lackluster writing doesn't help the voice actor with his direction either. He constantly sounds like he's lost. Only making matters worse is that his relationships are very poorly established. His connection with Vaatu comes completely out of left field. And why is the parody of Unalaq more interesting than the canon one? Now, in spite of all these problems, here's how I think Unalaq can be fixed. Want to know what the worst part of him is, actually? People don't realize how much of a wasted opportunity he is. Not just as a villain, but to make the series easier to follow. Unalaq could have been a way to connect all the plot points together, being the series' anchor, so to speak. Unalaq being a world leader would have granted him the most connections. In the new timeline I created, Tarlok's death and Amon's actually mean something. So should Tarlok's past connections. Tarlok was representative of the Northern Water Tribe, and who other than Unalaq would have appointed him? This would provide the needed development for both Tarlok and Unalaq. We can learn more about their history together, and now Unalaq would have the perfect tool to manipulate Korra with in Season 2, the death of her former mentor. As for Unalaq himself, rather than him just being a power-hungry dictator, how about you make him obsessed with understanding everything about the spirits, to the point it destroys him, just like a Lovecraftian protagonist. And I'm not just saying this just because Lovecraft's work is becoming more popular recently. This would actually be fitting for the spirits. Given they have knowledge that people don't, surely they also have knowledge that humans cannot comprehend. And I would make it that Unalaq's plans do not carry out properly. While he fuses with Vatu, he does not realize that Vatu is just using him the whole time, and he becomes absorbed by him, rather than becoming a permanent fusion. From what I've looked at with the villains, I think I might know what the root of all the pitfalls are. The biggest problem with Amon's arc is that either the creators or the network were too afraid of controversy. Basically, the creators acknowledged the elephant in the room, but either they didn't want to or weren't allowed to say why the elephant was there to begin with. Amon isn't wrong about the struggles that non-benders face, but interfering with other people's rights isn't going to help anybody. With Amon Tarlok's deaths, family violence has no political spectrum or time period, but it's controversial nevertheless. If you're going to write a story covering these topics, you need to fully dedicate your energy into looking into them, figure out the best way to execute them, and how to manage discourse, or don't cover them at all. At first I thought Bolin was the worst character, but looking over my notes, that turned out not to be the case. And no, Korra haters, it's not who you think it is. I actually think this is going to be my most successful video considering how people love hyperbole.
Now comes the part where we throw our heads back and laugh. Ready? Ready!
But I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm being completely honest when I say this is the worst character. While I believe Tarlok's relationship with Korra didn't provide the needed direction for Book 2, this character made things a lot worse. I always hated Tonraq. It started with him keeping Korra stuck at the South Pole, but then I realized there was a lot more to this than just questionable parenting behind his actions. Tonraq is behind several problems in this series, and the more I look into his character, the more disturbed I am. Yep, even more than with Bolin.
Coin monster, Tonraq is a morally grey character. Just wait until you're a parent.
No. A good parent would not even think of over-sheltering their child like this. Korra is the avatar for fuck's sakes. She's going to be in danger no matter what. If anything else, this made matters so much worse. This is the reason why Korra had such a hard time confronting even a picture of Amon in Book 1. It's been proven by psychologists that over-sheltering your children will only make it harder for them to deal with their own fears. Regardless of that fact, that entire argument is BTFO'd by one rather concerning thing. Tonraq lied to Korra about whose idea it was to keep her stuck at the South Pole, saying it was Aang who came up with it, when it was actually him and Tenzin who decided this. Why did Tenzin and Tonraq even say it was Aang's idea in the first place? The only reason I can think of is that Tonraq was embarrassed that he had his ass kicked by the Red Lotus, on top of being banished. Or he was afraid of his own daughter getting angry at him. Either way, keeping Korra stuck at home isn't even about her. It's about him. Also, that's rather inconsistent with what happened in the series premiere, when Tonraq and his wife Senna were perfectly fine with Korra going to Republic City all by herself. A morally grey character is someone who has to make difficult decisions to protect themselves or others, and whose actions lie in an ethical grey area. There's nothing difficult about passing the blame off to someone else. That's the most childish thing a person can do. This isn't how you write a morally great character. This is how you write a complete jackass. Now, like I said in the introduction for this series, I pointed out that Korra is a borderline Mary Sue, but Tonraq is a full Mary Sue, or rather a Gary Stu or Marty Stu. Tonraq is the reason why Korra has such a bad temper, and oversteps people's boundaries so much because of his overparenting. Korra learned that Tonraq had lied to her for her entire life, and then is forgiven in what can be assumed to be a matter of days. Making matters worse is that his wife has been enabling these lies, with the bullshit excuse, "We just wanted you to have a normal childhood." Tonraq teams up with the people who kidnapped Unalaq.
You what?
And then has his ass kicked by Unalaq and his men. Then, in spite of his fuck-ups, he is given the role of chief of the Northern Water Tribe, thus turning Korra into a borderline Mary Sue by granting Korra her unwarranted princess role. Want to know what the final nail in the coffin was? For me, it was Unalaq setting up Tonraq, only for his response to be, "My brother betrayed me."
How could this happen to me? Everyone else made my mistakes!
No, Mike and Brian. You don't get to bail him out like this. Even if Unalaq did set his brother up, Unalaq was still rash and incompetent regardless. Tonraq is an adult responsible for his own actions. Why did he commit such a cultural taboo when he could have just used neutral Jing and done nothing? The spirits would have taken care of the barbarians themselves for trespassing on their land. Do you want to know why I would argue Amon was the greater evil in season 1? It was because the whole time he knew Tarlok was his brother and didn't learn anything. Tarlok, after learning Amon was his missing brother, he realized that both of them became the monsters that their fathers raised them to be and accepted responsibility for his own actions. What did Tonraq learn when he found out Unalaq was partly responsible for the spirit forest being destroyed?
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
Tonraq, what exactly did you do in the past to make your brother realize you were this impulsive? This is off script, but I really don't want to get the reputation of being one of those angry reviewers because, well, they've overstayed their welcome. So, even after how pissed off I got at Tonraq, I can fix this character. You want me to not just tolerate Tonraq, but actually like him and his arc? Here's how it can be done.
I can make this work.
The first problem has actually already been taken care of. Given Korra would now be old enough to remember being kidnapped by the Red Lotus in this timeline, Tonraq, Tenzin, and Senna now no longer have a reason to lie to Korra at all. Keep Tonraq a general who is banished, but get rid of Unalaq setting him up. Just like with Amon's fake backstory, it needlessly complicated the plot, and it only hurt the impact of their villainry. Unalaq setting up his brother, quote-unquote, doesn't make me want to hate him. It makes me want to go full angry video game nerd on the writers. And just like I suggested with Korra, make Tonraq have no blood relation to Unalaq or have them be cousins, so the relationship is more distant and doesn't give anyone roles that they don't need or deserve. Considering Tonraq and Unalaq had no chemistry to begin with, you don't even have to reanimate these scenes because the context would stay exactly the same. Now to fix the conflict, we have to start by rewriting the series premiere. Korra is kidnapped by the Red Lotus at age 5, leading to the White Lotus coming over and looking into this matter. They learn that Korra is the Avatar when she shows them she can both earth and firebend. Skip to years later, Korra is shown writing to Asami, who is her pen pal. Tonraq had it ordered that all of Korra's mail needs to be checked if she's gonna have a pen pal. Korra, becoming an adult, is growing less tolerant of this. Korra learns that Tenzin won't be able to teach her airbending due to the terrorism and civil unrest going on in Republic City. Korra watches the airbenders leave and then looks down at the letter she wants to send to Asami, deciding she's had enough. Wanting to see Asami and learn airbending motivates her to sneak out, with Katara finding her. Katara says she'll notify Korra's parents and the White Lotus after Korra leaves, asking for forgiveness instead of permission. Korra arrives in Republic City and meets Asami, and stays with her for a night. This is when Korra tells Asami she's the Avatar, and Asami comes up with the idea of Korra disguising herself. Back at the South Pole, Tonraq and Senna are afraid of what happened to Korra after finding her room empty. Katara tells Korra's parents that she's in Republic City all by herself, and Tonraq loses his shit. Korra, being arrested like she originally was in the series premiere, is in police custody, and Tenzin is there to send her home. At Air Temple Island's harbor, Tonraq is there with Tenzin and tells Korra off for terrifying him and his wife. Korra then argues with her father, telling her Asami came up with a compromise. Tonraq is at first horrified that Korra told Asami she was the Avatar, but then with some reasoning, both him and Tenzin decide the disguise is doable to keep Korra safe. Let this conflict boil over into Book 2. Despite Korra telling the world she's the Avatar in Book 1's final, oops, spoilers I guess, Tonrak still gets into an argument with Korra and Unalaq over who will teach her about the spirits. Instead of Senna making a bullshit excuse for lying to her child, have her explain why Tonrak blatantly disregarded his culture's warnings about trespassing on spirit grounds, and why it is so difficult for so many people to admit when they're wrong. Have it that Tonrak had to take a risk attacking in the spirit forest because the barbarians would only continue to terrorize his people. The risk doesn't pay off, resulting in him being banished and making him fear any risk is not worth taking. This would explain why Tonrak would overshelter his daughter after she is kidnapped. Don't resolve this conflict within a few episodes like you did originally. Stretch this out for the whole season. Korra, now increasingly frustrated with her own mistakes, resulting in her losing her second waterbending mentor, Tarlok, learning her father isn't who she thought he was, causes her to push him out of her life. Have Tonrak earn Korra's trust back.
But Koi Monster, that's so cruel. You can't make Korra reject her own father?
Yeah, I can. You would do the same thing if you had to put up with this. And for those who wouldn't, leaving toxic people in your life, regardless of whether they're related to you or not, isn't healthy. Who would want to keep Tonrak in their life after everything I described?
All we've done, all that's happened is we have been attacked.
Attacked?
Attacked.
Why are you behaving like this?
Because I'm insulted. You verbally insulted me yesterday, and I held my tongue out of class. I didn't tell you the truth. I didn't say nasty things to you.
Really?
Okay, really, I didn't really.
When I told you about the burger, you refused to listen.
You don't understand. You're judging me on you coming in here, disrupting the entire service. I've been doing this.
Disrupting?
You did disrupt us last night. How could I focus when you're
What about
on
my
my
lunch?
food? When you're standing here
What about
talking
when you
to my
cooked for
husband.
me?
What about when I cooked for you?
Who disrupted you then?
Everybody. What are you talking about?
Blaming everybody again.
I do my best so our business doesn't close because we can't find qualified people. You go get Miranda and that little Katie and Jessica, bring them here and let me see how they work.
They won't come back
Will
in
you
here.
do that? Of course.
Do you know what? They're scared of you.
They're
and they're
scared of me.
embarrassed. But unfortunately, you've convinced yourself in your little Amy's world that everything you cook, touch, send is perfect.
I do not. What? Am I arguing?
Garlic
with you?
aioli goes well with white truffle.
Well,
That
let
pasta's
me
delicious.
show you some. Can I show you reviews? Hundreds of
Oh,
reviews
no.
that are excellent that
Oh,
you
no.
didn't write that
Not
are
the
from real
bullies on the
customers.
internet again.
No, good reviews, real customers that have supported us for
Look
6
at the way
years.
look at the way.
You're attacking my business and
Attacking?
my life. This is
I'm
all
telling
I
you the
do is
problems.
live this life every day. You're not telling me the problems. You are saying I'm delusional, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. Can we talk about what we came here to speak about, please?
Yeah, let them finish. Yeah, I want them to
You
finish
told me
all
to be
what you
honest
said. I am always
about
honest.
the problems that you've had, that you cannot talk to your wife, and the issues that she can't take criticism before
she knows that.
I met
That's
you.
fine. I have no problem
No,
saying
yes,
that.
That's fine. Wow. You're too far gone.
Okay, then let's end the show. You think I'm too far gone? There's no hope. Yalla, yalla. It's Christmas. Let's go home. Okay.
They can't help people that can't help themselves and cannot ever take 1 ounce of criticism. And if you're not willing to change, I'm not going to butt heads, argue, scream, whatever you want to say. But this is not normal. And it's not normal for a restaurant to go through that many staff. It's not normal for a kitchen that small to have 65 items on the menu. And it's not normal for the level of animosity that you've built inside this restaurant and outside. You have the right to run the business the way you want to run your business. I have the right to do the right thing. And the right thing for me is to get out of here. Good luck.
At the end of the season, have Tonrak tell Korra the positive side of his mess up, that is that he learned not to mess with forces he doesn't understand. And along with the new superhero plot point, show Tonrak learn from his own daughter.
I was so terrified when you told the world that you were the Avatar. But seeing you now flourish after you took that risk, I am so proud of you. You have taught me how important it is to not fear risks.
Tonrak redeeming himself to both his tribe and his family for being banished is good enough for his character. You don't need to overcomplicate it any more than that. Terrible writing advice has made the point in the past that badly written comic relief characters can actually be worse for a story than poorly written love interests. While the bad love interests can be annoying, they don't doom the entire story, and don't wreck the tone like the comic relief can. I actually think that a badly written family member can actually be worse than both of these two things combined. Regardless if I do end up making a video on this topic, regardless if terrible writing advice beats me to the punch, I'm letting you guys know now. If you find yourself in this situation where you wrote a character like this unintentionally, you're gonna have to bite the bullet. I know the topic of families is close to home for all of us, but not addressing your mess-ups head-on will only make things way more awkward.
I'm so angry. This has been an angry review.
A song that gets on everybody's nerves, yes, on everybody's nerves. I know a song that gets on everybody's nerves, and this is how it goes.
I don't actually have much to complain about. The characters are the most consistent in the secondary cast, but their major drawback is that their setups confuse the messages that the writers want to get across or harm the tension. The only character in this whole series that needs major changes would be Desna. Speaking of which, let's just get into it. There was no point to Eska having a brother. These two are basically the same character. That seems to be a running theme in this season. Desna was only there as a minion to his father or the butt of jokes. Either find a use for Desna or just get rid of him. Now this might sound strange, but I actually suggest if you keep Desna, you change his role entirely and make him the family servant, not Eska's brother. Why, you may ask? Desna being the family servant would actually explain Eska's controlling behavior without an info dump. He would have no choice but to follow orders and would be the only person Eska would consider friends for many years. That in combination with her overbearing father would lead her to believing all relationships function like this, making her go full yandere on Bolin. Change Desna's design, but keep his color scheme the same to show his relationship with Eska. Leading into this, the worst part of Eska was her unrealistic abusive behavior towards Bolin. Eska is set up to be shown as if abusive girlfriends or boyfriends are obvious off the bat, and is framed as if Bolin is to blame, as he's too stupid to realize it. This isn't how abusive relationships start out at all. Abusive relationships start out like any other, but red flags will be present. And just like with Korra and her father, Bolin and Eska's conflict was resolved way too quickly. I don't want to sound hypocritical, but toxic relationships have the tendency to be a two-way street. I have to set up the example first this time around. I would make it that Eska's behavior is different in public versus in private. I would make Eska act very shy in public, but then when she is alone with Bolin, that is when she starts to get very pushy. Bolin, not knowing how to express his frustrations with this, tries to cheat on Eska right in front of her with the actress Ginger.
Are you making a porno or something?
Oh, not like that, you pervert. This only makes Eska more invasive and demanding, followed by her becoming controlling. The blow-up point in the relationship would be when Bolin gets home after losing everything after his ego exploded in his face. Eska puts all the blame on him, demanding he get everything back. Bolin points out that she's a princess and should pay for it herself. Eska then beats up Bolin for suggesting such a thing. Whoa, I didn't realize I could write something so dark. Abusive relationships can also stem from dependency and codependency. Domestic violence, while serious, isn't as black and white as many people believe it is. On another note with Eska, I find one thing rather odd in the ending of the episode Peacekeepers, when Korra is taken down by a spirit based off of a Japanese legend, the Umbazo, this word here.
Umabozu.
Just like in the real Japanese legends, this spirit takes away memories from arrogant people to teach them humility. If that's the case, why didn't it target Eska? She's even worse than Korra. If you have to keep the memory loss plot point with the spirit, have Eska be taken down with Korra. Even though Korra and Eska would wake up not remembering each other, it would force them to work together and would provide needed character growth. People can miss red flags in relationships because, just like the abuser themselves, they grew up in an environment where they were taught this behavior was normal. Instead of being the abuser, however, they don't establish healthy boundaries and become the victim once again. Given Bolin lost his parents at a young age and lived on the streets, he didn't have someone to instill healthy boundaries in him. Having to work for gangs wouldn't have helped either. This is why Bolin would not realize Eska's behavior is abusive even if made obvious. One thing that gets to me now is that the Airbender kids aren't shown to be traumatized by being kidnapped by Amon in Book 1's final. This could have been explored more, at least show the kids to be more paranoid and less outgoing than they were originally. Now this is my only complaint for Book 4. While I like most of Milo's developments in Book 4, I don't like his sudden straw man sexist attitude that came out of nowhere. I understand why King Wu would have this outlook on women. He's from a royal family, many of the family servants were likely women, comes from an old school background, and growing up in this environment would lead him to see all women as his servants. Milo has grown up with two sisters in a much less strict environment, and doesn't have a horrible relationship with any of his female family members. Where did he pick up this viewpoint? Milo is also an airbender. Aren't they supposed to be okay with people doing whatever they want so long as they don't hurt anyone? Air is the element of freedom after all. And this sudden change in attitude from Milo doesn't help this message, because it sets up this behavior as if it's a phase boys go through and not a learned behavior, which it is. This is the only thing I would cut from Milo's personality entirely. Jinora has a likable personality throughout the whole series, but her spiritual connection along with harmonic conversions had no foreshadowing, making her come across as overpowered. Jinora knows things she shouldn't and aren't really relevant to the plot. How does she know Unalaq is a terrible father? That opens up some concerning implications. My guess is through the connection with the spirits, yet she does nothing to help his children. Given Avatar is heavily inspired by the Miyazaki films, let's look at My Neighbor Totoro. In this film, it's explained only children can see spirits. Maybe have it so all children in the Avatar world, right off the bat, have a strong connection with the spirits. Jinora, being the studious type, would want to maintain her connection with her spirit friends. Or just like how Princess Yue had a connection with the spirits, as they saved her life as a baby, turning her into the moon spirit. Tenzin may have never gotten into the spirit world, but that doesn't mean he's never made contact with them. Maybe Jinora being present with Tenzin when meeting the spirits linked her, so to speak, allowing her to easily go into the spirit world. Just please, whatever you do, don't make the problem bigger by going midichlorians on us and make her powers inherited.
Tenzin had some great development in Book 2, but the episode The Guide did him pretty dirty. It took the writers way too long to show Tenzin struggling to connect with the spirit world.
Ring, ring, hello? Ring, ring, hello? Ring, ring, hello? Ring, ring, hello? Ring, ring.
You have a bad connection!
On top of this, the way Tenzin speaks to Milo made him far less sympathetic. The way he spoke to his 5-year-old son, Milo, can negatively affect a child's emotional growth for years, even if you only do it once. I understand Tenzin is frustrated, but taking out on your family is not cool. And when it came to Jinora, I understand Tenzin didn't want his daughter getting hurt in the spirit world, but he could have at least warned Korra and Jinora about the actual dangers or what they should expect there instead of just being dismissive about it. The entire world is at stake if someone doesn't help Korra go in there. Tenzin can still be frustrated, but him taking it out on his kids is way too much, or at least have him more heavily chastised for it. And you can show he is struggling to get into the spirit world without padding out the entire episode. Just like I suggested with Bolin and the Movers, make all the scenes with Tenzin and his family in one episode. This would make the subplot easier to follow and would be a good breather episode before diving into the action again. Okay, so that's good. Oh, come on, stupid In spite of my complaints with Tenzin and his family, if it weren't for them, I would have deemed Book 2 unwatchable. I would only consider the changes to Eska to be mandatory, while the changes to Jinora, while not serious, would at least help add tension to Book 2's final and throughout Season 3.
When it comes to the spirits, I have the most mixed feelings about them. While I'm happy they gave the spirits an arc this time, the spirits themselves could use a lot more work to add tension to the plot. This video is actually the first time I would recommend getting rid of something entirely. You'll see what it is. Avatar 1 is the character who showed up the most abruptly, and his voice actor could have better direction. He sounds like he's chatting with friends in the recording booth, not playing a character. While I like Juan's backstory of gaining respect from the spirits, a lot of his scenes come across as preachy, and his interactions with the spirits open up a lot of questions. My first beef with Juan and the writers is acting as if they have the high ground over hunters. Do I really need to explain that life wasn't easy 10,000 years ago? Grocery stores didn't exist, and markets' products would go bad much quicker than they do now without refrigeration. So how else would people get their food? And no, farming wasn't a great option for most of history either. Weather was far less predictable without weather forecasting. Greenhouses and metal fencing to keep out wild animals and allow year-round growing wouldn't be invented until the 1800s. And even animals, in spite of being domesticated, were still extremely unpredictable. And farming equipment? Who is Juan and the writers to criticize people for relying on killing animals for food? Or act like nature is nothing more than what you see in your backyard?
Meanwhile!
Bitch.
As for the spirits, if humans and spirits were shown to hate each other in Juan's time, why is it when Aang is alive that humans seek the spirits for protection and guidance? I know a lot can happen in 10,000 years, but an explanation would have been nice. I do like that the studio was willing to take risks by changing the art style for a different era, but unfortunately the ancient ink painting backgrounds clash with the modern anime-styled characters. Some fans have argued that people getting their bending from the Lion Turtles and how one became the Avatar retconned what the Lion Turtles said in Avatar's final. In the era before the Avatar, people bent the energy within themselves. I don't believe this is an inherent contradiction. People could have gotten these energy bending powers from the Lion Turtles in the past and stopped using it because of how dangerous it was. They likely learned these abilities were possible from animals and the moon as brought up in the original series. What will help Juan's story, and give his voice actor better direction, is showing the brutality of nature. The scenes where Juan is struggling alone in the woods come across more as an inconvenience rather than actual danger. Have Juan's treehouse be destroyed in a storm, and have him barely survive a disease that modern vaccines could have prevented sometime in his life. At first, maybe Juan resents nature, given his past, until he learns about firebending, giving him the power to control part of nature, rather than just making him some nature-loving hippie. The chows can still be there to add insult to injury. For how Juan met the spirits and his animal guide, out in the wild, Juan could have trespassed on the animal's territory without realizing it. The cat deer attacks Juan, scratching his leg badly, leading to it becoming infected.
Nope.
This infection would give him better reason to want to get into the spirit world hot spring and give needed attention. After failing to get into the hot spring, the cat deer continues to stalk Juan and attacks him again. Juan fighting the animal would now consider killing it for his meal. In the end, Juan chooses to tame the cat deer, realizing he would use the animal to travel, allowing him to find more food and help him with his infection, increasing his likelihood to survive. Juan taming the cat deer in this scenario would show that humans have to be selfish for a reason, but the spirits would see he came to a compromise with the animal and his instincts. Relating to this, Juan could get the humans and spirits to understand each other and come to an agreement. The spirits would learn that the humans have their instincts for a reason, and humans would agree to perform rituals and help the spirits from becoming corrupted or dying. And in exchange, the spirits would protect humans from Mother Nature. Juan overcoming not just what his culture taught him, but challenging his own instincts as well, would make him a far more powerful character. For the change in backgrounds for Juan's era, have them be a combination of the modern anime style and ancient ink painting backgrounds. Take the shading, lighting, and perspective from modern art, take the details and textures from the classic Chinese art style, and mix the two styles would fit better with the anime-styled characters and still honor the ancient works of art. Oh boy, let's get this part out of the way. The opening scene for Book 2 is horrible. It has characters we only see once being attacked by a dark spirit in the middle of the ocean. Unless there were survivors of this attack, or Unalaq connected with the spirits to see this, how does anyone know this even happened? Thanks, writers. Not only did you waste an opportunity for characters that I do care about, you opened up Book 2 on a massive plot hole. There's several reasons why the dark spirits, including Batu, don't work. In science, it's explained there's actually no such thing as darkness, just a lack of light.
Not scientifically possible!
And yes, comment section, I know this is a fantasy world. What you have to remember is that the entire basis of waterbending are based on scientific principles. The moon controls the Earth's tides, which was an early learning tool for the first waterbenders. Bloodbending and healing is based on the scientific fact that the human body is made up of 60 to 70% water. So what I'm really getting at is the lack of consistency. Along with this, the dark spirits in design and concept are uninspired. They retconned the lore from Avatar as they never showed up in the first series, and overcomplicated Book 2's plot, along with this asshole. The dark spirits themselves aren't scary and they show up out of nowhere. The characters only tell why they're angry rather than show it. How do we fix this then? Get rid of the dark spirits. I'm serious. Not only should they not exist according to science, they shouldn't exist according to Avatar's rules. There's no working with that. Remember these guys from the last series? They'll be a fine replacement for the dark spirits.
Garbage day! Huh? No!
And for the sake of argument, I'm going to be referring to them as the corrupted spirits. Now, the addition of the light spirits in of itself is not a problem, but I would add to their relationship with the creature spirits. Have the creature spirits and light spirits have a symbiotic relationship. Without the light spirits, the creature spirits become bloodthirsty zombies. Without the creature spirits, the light spirits die and fade away. The light spirits can also die if the proper rituals aren't carried out, which is where their relationship with humans would come in. Regular animals could also be affected by the spirits as well. In the Southern Lights, this could have created more conflict. with Naga turning on Korra and showing that the spirits are angry that their grounds are being trespassed on during the festival. While there were some creative aspects to the spirit world, it could have gone the extra mile. When Korra gets upset in the spirit world, all that happens in the area is that it gets dark and the spirits get a bit grouchy. Just like with Wan struggling in the wild, it once again comes across more as an inconvenience rather than actual danger. The spirit world would have been much scarier if everything was completely distorted and started falling apart along with the spirits themselves. When Korra turns into a child in the spirit world, it could have more intense flashbacks of the event or parallels from when Korra was kidnapped as a child in the new timeline I created. The spirits should have gone savage on each other. On top of this, after Korra calms down, things shouldn't just go back to normal. It should have lasting effects on the area. Like I brought up in the secondary cast video, Rava and Vaatu are the same character.
No shit, Sherlock.
Rava and Wan's relationship really needs to be worked on. When faced with conflict, Rava has a quick change of heart with Wan and no convincing needed. What hurt these two characters the most in Season 2 was that it was never explained what 10,000 years of darkness even means. In order to be invested, we need clear stakes. Not only does Vaatu go against the rules of the world as I established before, he also doesn't work thematically. While a generic doomsday villain isn't a bad thing in of itself, as long as the rest of the writing is strong enough, Vaatu, however, just being a big spooky shadow, defeats the philosophies of Avatar. That being, there is no such thing as good or evil, someone or something is out of balance. I know that Rava and Vaatu can't exist without each other, but I feel there is a better way to express this theme. My next criticism is actually a problem I have with Avatar looking back that also applies to Korra.
Shh, it's okay, have a Snickers.
Certain scenes are cheapened by some of the spirits, including not just Rava and Vaatu, but spirits as a whole being given the ability to speak, which takes away the illusion of the spirits being from another world. The spirits' presence alone should be more than enough to provoke emotions in the characters and the audience. The only exception to this rule would be Wan Shi-tong and Ko. Wan Shi-tong being, well, the one who knows 10,000 things, and Ko not just because his voice acting is top-notch, but because he steals faces, which is where he likely gets the ability to speak, making it come across as unnatural. For my example on fixing Rava and Vaatu, I'm gonna have to spoil the entirety of the Dark Crystal. If you don't want it spoiled, here's the timestamp. In the Dark Crystal, there are two major races, the Uru and the Skeksis, that are actually part of the same being called the Ur-Skeks. The Ur-Skeks believed they could purge the bad aspects of themselves, but by doing so they created the Skeksis, who became tyrants and committed genocide against all other groups. At the end of the movie, the Skeksis and Uru are merged back together into the Ur-Skeks. What I think would have done Rava and Vaatu more favors if, say for example, was if Rava and Vaatu were once the same being, just like the Skeksis and the Uru. Rava purging the bad part of herself, believing it would destroy all evil, but ended up creating a separate being. This would go better with the dark spirit aspect, as this would go with the Lovecraft-based mythos I explained with Unalaq. Vaatu contradicting the rules of nature would now have an advantage in its plot. Before, ignoring this fact just made Rava and Vaatu uninspired and generic. During harmonic conversions, Korra could merge Rava and Vaatu back together, and then back into herself. But by doing so, Korra sacrifices her connection with her past lives. This would show Korra had to make a choice, instead of her coming across as lazy, as many people have accused her of being. Considering Rava is now merged back with Vaatu, this could make the Avatar state even more dangerous, as the Avatar now could become corrupted if in an extreme emotional state while using it. Regardless, this would show Korra is continuously becoming more selfless as the show goes on.
So you're just stealing ideas from other media now?
Just like how Avatar stole a setting and plot point from The Empire Strikes Back in its second season, originality doesn't exist. In place of Rava and Vaatu speaking, they could show their emotions by changing colors or patterns. Rava could also telepathically send images to Wan's mind to get him to realize what's going on instead of telling him through speech.
I am now going to assault your mind with subliminal messages. Sorry you had to see that.
As for the stakes for Book 2, make the 10,000 Years of Darkness be just that. 10,000 Years of Darkness where no life can be created or sustained. Now here's how Season 2 would go.
The centuries of fighting amongst the humans causing the light spirits to be destroyed. This led to the creature spirits being corrupted, creating a seemingly endless cycle of violence. humans continuously left traumatized and being reduced to nothing but their instincts. Korra finds herself at the crossroads of humanity with the harmonic convergence. Her own friends and family trapped in a cycle, and all she, the Avatar, can do is merely delay the inevitable heat death of the universe.
That's a lot more terrifying than I'm a spooky shadow who mildly inconveniences you. The new relationship between the light and the creature spirits would not only create some more depth to the spirit ecosystem, but also the symbolism. Just as there is no such thing as darkness, there is no such thing as hatred, only a lack of love.
Aww.
Korra's relationships are either too close, making her come across as overly privileged, or start out too distant, not creating the emotional impact that the series needs, or the proper setup. The second biggest flaw is Korra not contacting her past lives when she should have, also hurting the emotional impact. Changing the opening to the series to Korra being kidnapped as a child would have created more tension, fixed most of the plot holes, and would have provided better setup for the characters' relationships, making the series much stronger. The other problems outside of this, a lot of people don't seem to realize that these were problems just as much in Korra as in the original series. In fact, I'm gonna argue some of the consistent flaws were even worse in the original series. Get angry at me all you want for saying this, at least The Legend of Korra actually resolved its romantic and family plot threads within the show itself, not the spin-off comics.
Hey, that's mildly adequate.
People assumed the Lion Turtles and Korra retconned Avatar's lore, when in reality they weren't developed enough to begin with, as they threw a wrench into a lot of things before Korra ever came along. I think it's great they could come up with a way to make Aang take down the Fire Lord peacefully, and the designs of the Lion Turtles were creative. But Aang had to work for everything else in the series, yet not for the energy bending. The Lion Turtles need a lot more implementation into other parts of the plot in order to justify their existence. The only foreshadowing we even got was Aang looking at a picture of the Lion Turtles in Wan Shi Tong's library. Aang could have heard stories growing up about the Lion Turtles and told them to his friends throughout the series, and could have come across them in his dreams, as they were already important to the plot. The Lion Turtles could have communicated to Aang in his dreams that he wasn't ready to hold this power yet, and then give it to him when he had proven himself. Once again, the fact that the Lion Turtles, along with most of the spirits, can speak, takes away the illusion that they're supposed to be from another world. Also this. The Lion Turtles and the family and romantic plot threads would be two of the few things that I would go back and change from the original series. What's the other thing, you might be asking?
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. They're the same picture.
Katara isn't a horrible character, and I understand why many people love her. Katara for once is a girl who wasn't just there as a love interest, she was a character who just happened to be a love interest. But she's the most inconsistent character out of the whole main cast. I can understand a person can be two different things, but Katara's angry outbursts, making her look childish, goes against her motherly personality, with very little overlap. When Korra gets angry, it's always because she is frustrated. Katara's source of anger tends to be all over the place. When someone isn't listening to her, not getting her way, not wanting her friends to get hurt, or because someone has wronged her.
But Katara is a better written character than Korra.
Well, maybe if she's that inconsistent and her anger problems are that underdeveloped, maybe she's not as well written as you thought. So, if The Legend of Korra has this many flaws, why do I like it? The same reason I liked Avatar. It's well-written child characters, it's well-choreographed fight scenes, and the base of each of these characters aren't bad, but I believe they can do better. Season 3 and 4 actually improved with its setup and pacing. Season 4 covered the topic of mental illness with respect, which is very rare in media. At the end of the day, The Legend of Korra was made by the same people, and it didn't go out of its way to be as disrespectful as it possibly could with its source material or the original fans, unlike the Star Wars sequels. So excuse me for seeing all the fighting between these supposedly two different fan bases to be a rather fruitless venture. So why did I make this series to begin with? I was working on a fan comic for The Legend of Korra about a girl named Reba who is a non-bender who works as a double agent for Amon and Tarlok, and I was having trouble finding direction at many points. So I went back and rewatched Korra and found where I was struggling to find direction. It wasn't just that Korra had flaws that I couldn't work with, but I underestimated the work that needed to go into it. I made this series not just to defend Korra, but to provide myself a template for my own work that I'll continue after this.
So, you're a fan fiction writer?
Yeah, you gotta start somewhere. And what, you really think Amon and Tarlok are above hiring a double agent? Even though I plan to put most of these ideas into my own work, it would still be cool if they made a reboot for Korra. I would recommend using open source software to cut down costs. Considering all these options and the fact that Avatar found great success on Netflix,
That one didn't age quite so well.
And Justice League got a new cut, and the mixed reviews for Korra, well, there is really no excuse at this point. I want The Legend of Korra to be remembered as the masterpiece it should have been, alongside its predecessor.
But there's no way Viacom or Mike and Brian are going to listen to your feedback.
Well, fine, if you don't want my money.
Money?
Let me tell you about my GPA, 4.0 straight A's, and I don't give a fuck. Let me tell you about my resume, it's so cray, it's insane, and I don't give a fuck. And my boyfriend, he's so hot, and the car that he bought me is I don't give a fuck. And my ooh la la, my blah blah blah, and I don't give a fuck.